Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden pardons his son Hunter over federal gun and tax charges. President-elect Donald Trump calls it miscarriage of justice. Iran-backed militias reportedly entered Syria to support President Bashar al-Assad's army after Islamist rebels took over Aleppo. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz arrives in Kiev on a surprise visit for the first time in 2.5 years. It comes days after he was criticized for a call with Russian President Putin. Georgian police arrest prominent opposition leader Zurab jeopardized as protesters continue to rally outside the parliament in Tbilisi over suspension of the EU accession talks. At least 56 people were killed after stone pelting by supporters led to stampedes at a football match in Guinea's second largest city of Massacre. Hello and welcome. Our top story today is from the southern African nation of Angola, which is being visited by the outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden, with the goal of touting a win against China in the race for Africa. With this visit, Joe Biden delivers on his promise to visit Africa during his presidency. However, he is facing heavy criticism as the 3-day visit comes only at the tail end of his term. In a few weeks from now, he will hand over power to President-elect Donald Trump. Despite criticism, the Biden administration officials say his visit is not too little too late, as it will put the U.S. back on track in Africa after years of being off the field. There have been questions also on Biden's choice of oil-rich Angola as the sole African country to visit over the traditionally closer allies such as Kenya. During his visit, U.S. President Joe Biden will meet his Angolan counterpart, Joe Lourenço, and the two leaders are expected to hold talks and to make announcements on security cooperation, health, security, agribusiness, and cultural ties. The visit by the U.S. President is aimed at highlighting the country's investments in Africa under his watch in the face of China's deepening inroads. Biden's visit marks the first time of a sitting U.S. president to sub-Saharan Africa since 2015. It is also the first time a U.S. president has visited Angola, hosting the African leaders in Washington in 2022. Biden promised to visit the continent the next year, but missed the deadline. He was scheduled to visit Angola in October of this year, but was postponed due to the devastating hurricanes that hit the U.S. Biden's visit focuses on a major U.S.-backed railway project that aims to divert critical minerals away from China. The project, which is partly funded with a U.S. loan, links the resource-rich Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia to the Angolan port of Lobito on the Atlantic Ocean. This project will offer a fast and efficient route for exports to the West. At stake are vast supplies of minerals like copper and cobalt, and these minerals that are a key component in batteries and electronics are found in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But competition to access resources in the region has been intensifying in recent years. For now, China is the top player in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Beijing also signed an agreement with Tanzania and Zambia earlier this year to revive a rival railway line to Africa's eastern coast. China's investments and influence have far outpaced that of the US under President Xi Jinping. Beijing has poured billions of dollars across Africa into infrastructure projects under the Belt and Road Initiative. This has become an increasing concern to Washington. Angola has long nurtured close ties with China and Russia, but recently it has moved closer to the West. Luanda has been clear. It says it is open for business. It wants to work with any partner that can advance their agenda to promote economic growth. So it has become an active area of geopolitical rivalry. Beyond this railway project, the US has done little to advance ties with African nations and access vast reserves of minerals across the continent, which Washington says are critical for national security. This as China, Russia, and Gulf nations continue to seize commercial and strategic opportunities. Earlier this year, the US lost a major spy base in Niger and has failed to find an ally that will host these assets. Now, this has left the US without a military foothold in the Sahel region that has become a hotspot of Islamist terrorism. Niger, along with other West African countries, dumped the US-led West and tilted towards Russia, and Moscow has been expanding its footprint in the region, with the junta-ruled states relying on Moscow for security assistance. Competing with China and Russia has remained common on the agenda for both Biden and Trump. This visit by Joe Biden delivers only one of a sweeping set of pledges to Africa. Others remain hollow promises for now. These include gaining 2 permanent seats for Africa at the UN Security Council. And some analysts say that Donald Trump is likely to remain a close partner to Angola when he returns to the Oval Office in January, while others remain skeptical. During his first term, Trump did refer to African nations as shithole countries. So Trump is tearing up Biden's reset of relations could also not be surprising. Now, for more on this, we have with us Dr. Alex Vines, who is the Director of Africa Programme at Chatham House and is joining us live from London in the United Kingdom. Thank you for being with us.
You're very welcome.
Now, how does President Biden's visit to Angola and the focus on the US-backed railway project reflect the broader US strategy to counter China's influence in Africa, particularly in securing these mineral supply chains?
Well, you're right. And as you've described, the Lobito corridor is part of a Western effort. It's not just the United States, because the European Union, through its Global Gateway project, is funding the Lobito corridor, as is also the African Development Bank. And so the Lobito corridor is about accessing the cobalt and particularly the copper from the Democratic Republic of the Congo down to Lobito port. The reality, though, is that although it's funded by the American taxpayer and the European taxpayer and some other financiers, the Lobito corridor is actually for all minerals going down that corridor for whoever wants to take them down the corridor. And so the beneficiaries to this investment, this uplift of this corridor, are not American companies or mining companies. They are actually Chinese and Canadian ones in the short term. The initial contract to use this particular revitalized line has gone to a Canadian and Chinese company, for example, which mines copper in the DRC. Mm. So although there is geopolitics into this, right, there is actually multipolarity also.
And Doctor, if you're still there, let me ask you another question. What are the economic and the geopolitical implications of diverting Angola's critical minerals away from China, both for Angola and for the African continent as a whole? How might this move influence the regional partnerships and development?
Well, the Lobito corridor is not about Angola's natural resources necessarily. It's about the Congolese ones, the DRC, and potentially if there's a branch line to Zambia and the Zambian copper belt. I think the big question isn't about diversion, because it's not. What I'm arguing is that this corridor is actually going to be used by the Chinese and the Canadians in the short term more than anybody from the United States. And the Chinese mined minerals will probably go to the global market, and the United States might buy some of that, but so will China, potentially even South Africa, who knows? I think the biggest concern that I have about this corridor and the investment is that it is just the extraction of raw materials, and that's the point. It should be about where's the value addition, where's the smelting. This is about keeping more money and creating more jobs in Africa, rather than taking the natural resources of Africa and just sending them to China or Russia or the European Union or the United States. That doesn't make any sense to me, and that's the weakness of this particular initiative.
Right. Doctor, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa and for your valued insights and analysis on the latest there.
Thank you very much.
Moving on, it's not just the United States. Pressure is also building on France as it continues to lose influence over its former colonies in Africa. In the latest, tensions are brewing between France and its former colony of Senegal. Dakar has asked Paris to come clean and state facts on the 1944 massacre of African soldiers. On Sunday, Senegal marked the 80th anniversary of the brutal killing of African soldiers who fought for France during the Second World War and were gunned down by French troops for demanding fair treatment and payment on their return. France's Foreign Affairs Minister was also in attendance at the ceremony, along with other African heads of state. For years, the West African country has demanded that France take responsibility, officially apologise and investigate the 1944 massacre in Traoré, a fishing village near the capital of Dakar. The atrocity has long been a bone of contention between the two countries. The French military claims that somewhere between 35 to 75 soldiers were killed. However, historians assert that nearly 400 people died. There has been mounting international pressure to exhume mass graves to verify the official death toll. Paris has been accused of falsifying or hiding records. Days before the commemoration, French President Emmanuel Macron, in a letter to his Senegalese counterpart, Bassirou Faye, referred to these killings as a massacre. He also said that France was cooperating with Senegal to establish the truth. Senegal's president said that Macron's acknowledgement, a first, was a significant step in the process of rehabilitating the honour and dignity of the victims. Earlier this year, the Senegalese Prime Minister accused France of trying to unilaterally determine the way it had treated the African soldiers who served in its armies. Now, this comes as France is losing influence over its former African colonies. Many of them have turned to Russia for security and other assistance, and France is facing growing opposition to its military presence. Francophone countries in West and Central Africa, including Burkina Faso, Niger and Mali, that have been taken over by military juntas, have expelled French forces. Recently, Chad, one of the last countries in the region where France maintained its military presence, ended a defence cooperation agreement with Paris. Last week, Senegal's President Faye has said that France should close its military bases in the country. Senegal still hosts around 350 French troops, mainly in a supportive role. Faye, who came to power this year with promises of ending dependence on foreign powers, said that French bases were incompatible with Senegal's sovereignty. So, is France set to witness another setback in Africa? Will Senegal be the next one to shut its doors to France? Will Dakar too turn to Moscow, or can the US fill in for its ally France? That remains to be seen. Turning our attention now to West Africa, where Ghana is on the risk of a government shutdown as an impasse in the country's parliament continues. Now, reports suggest that Ghana's parliament is very unlikely to pass a provisional budget ahead of the December 7th presidential and general elections, potentially risking an unprecedented government shutdown early next year. Now, generally, the country passes a provisional budget in November during election years to cover the gap until the next president takes office. But if the budget is not passed until the elections, reports say the government might have to cut back on interest payments and funding for the transition. The failure to pass a provisional budget would be the first in over 30 years for Ghana, which is a gold and cocoa producing nation. The Finance Minister, Mohamed Amin Adam, had set November the 15th deadline for presenting the budget, but has still not been able to do it. Now, Ghana's parliament has been on an indefinite break since the 23rd of October over an impasse on which two of the main parties holds the majority in the House. The move was triggered after a controversy erupted over the defection of 4 members of parliament, 2 from the ruling New Patriotic Party, or the NPP, and 1 from the opposition National Democratic Congress, and 1 independent lawmaker. Now, the Speaker of Parliament, Alban Bagbin, took cognizance of the situation and ruled that the 4 seats were vacant according to the Constitution, giving opposition NDC a majority in Parliament. The minority leader in the Parliament from the NDC party supported the Speaker's decision of declaring the 4 seats as vacant. But the change in political dynamics forced the ruling NPP to knock the Supreme Court's doors and question if the Speaker had interpreted the Constitution correctly. Now, the Supreme Court ruled on the 12th of November that the Parliament Speaker's declaration was unconstitutional. But ever since the ruling of the Supreme Court, the Speaker Bagbin has refused requests to recall the Parliament, saying it would interrupt the election campaign. Now, reports suggest that Ghana's labour unions have also been hoping for the Parliament to work on a solution before it begins impacting the workers. There are several loans and bills that need approval in addition to the provisional budget, and Parliament now has just a few weeks before the next president takes over. Now, the West African nation is set to elect a successor to President Nana Akufo-Addo, whose 2-term tenure as the head of state ends in January. In addition to the presidential elections, voters in Ghana also set to elect a new parliament that has 275 members. Now, in December, on the 7th, the elections, former President John Mahama of the opposition NDC party is seen as the main challenger to the vice president of Mahamadou Bawumia, who is the candidate for the ruling NPP. Moreover, 10 other candidates are also running in the elections, and among them, the independent candidates Nana Kwame Bediako and Alain Karametin are expected to take votes from the 2 main candidates. But reports suggest that John Mahama is set to win the elections, as many Ghanaians have been unhappy with the way that the ruling NPP has handled the West African country's worst economic crisis. Mahama, who has a 52% chance of winning, according to opinion polls, had invested heavily in infrastructure during his presidency between 2012 and 2017. Yet some experts suggest that the contest can be a close one between the 2 parties. No party has ever won more than 2 consecutive terms in Ghana's democratic history. But with the elections in just a few days, the West African country, the larger question remains, will the new government be able to run its business normally next year if Parliament fails to pass the provisional budget? And finally, moving our focus to the rising cyber attacks in Africa. Uganda has confirmed that accounts in the East African country's central bank had been hacked after reports claimed that millions of dollars were stolen in the cybercrime. Kampala, however, downplayed the claims that the offshore hackers spirited away as much as $17 million. Last week, reports had emerged that a hacker group known as Waste, that is based in Southeast Asia, accessed the Bank of Uganda's IT systems and illicitly transferred 62 billion Ugandan shillings, or $17 million, earlier this month. The stolen money was then deposited into accounts in Japan and the United Kingdom. The reports prompted President Yoweri Museveni to order an investigation into the matter and criticism from the opposition of the state of affairs in the country. Now, addressing the Parliament about the incident after the opposition's demand for clarification, the Minister of State for Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Henry Musasizi, has said that it was true that the account was hacked, but not to the extent of what is being reported in the media. Musasizi has added that the police's Criminal Investigations Department and the Auditor General were probing the incident. He also said that he will present a report of the findings of the investigation in a month's time. Now, the local media reports suggest that there is a slight possibility that the act might have actually been an insider job that was as a result of a collusion between officials at the Bank of Uganda, the Ministry of Finance's Treasury Department, and the Accountant General's Office. But nothing has been confirmed yet. Cyber attacks have been on the rise in Africa as the continent has been undergoing a rapid digitization. Weak cybersecurity systems and minimal regulatory frameworks across the continent have left many countries vulnerable to significant cyber threats. Reports suggest that annual estimates place the cost of cybercrime in Africa anywhere between $4 billion and $10 billion. Countries such as Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, Botswana, South Africa, Algeria, Tanzania, Madagascar, Chad, and Lesotho, among others, have been the most affected by cyber crimes and artificial intelligence-induced fraud that have created severe financial tolls. Now, cyber thieves from banks and other financial service providers, including telecom firms, have occurred many times in Uganda, and they have remained a critical concern in the country. During the 2023 to 24 financial year, 245 cases of cyber crimes were reported to the police. But some banks that have been affected by these crimes have been hesitant to publicly acknowledge such incidents due to fears of alienating customers. However, reports suggest that the Bank of Uganda has said it was waiting for a police probe report on the alleged hacking before providing the public with a detailed update. Reports have also indicated that Ugandan police had also written to the UK and Japan seeking assistance in establishing the identities of the individuals. However, the Japanese bank, through which the transfer was made, rejected Uganda's request to freeze the transfer made in August. On the contrary, the England Bank has effected Uganda's request to freeze $7 million, but it is believed that the hackers had already withdrawn some of the money from the bank in England. Now, while the probe is still underway and will be keenly watched by all, it raises several questions on the efficiency of security at the Bank of Uganda. Was the stealing of $17 million an insider job? How will the government be able to recover the lost money from the hackers? We will continue to get you updates on this here on Firstpost. And with that, it's a wrap on the show. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.